Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of our entrepreneur followers. Today, I have a very special guest with me. It's Bundeep Singh Rangar, a prominent figure in the fintech world who's going to speak to us about his journey and vision. And without further ado, Bundeep, thank you so much for coming over to our studios today.
Thank you, Mina. Always a pleasure to be here, although this is my first time, so always is a bit exaggerated.
Right. No, we're surely going to do more in the future. How are you feeling today?
Great. Dubai is always a great place to be, and it's nice and sunny today, so not complaining.
Perfect. I'm happy it's treating you well. Now, obviously, you're under the spotlight as we're going to discuss your journey on how you entered fintech and basically what inspired you. So, to kick off our interview, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and where did the inspiration come from to enter this ever evolving sector?
Sure. So, Bundeep Singh Rangar, I'm very decentralized. I grew up in 3 different countries, so I kind of look at myself as being not necessarily belonging to any one place. So you kind of belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Right.
So I was born in India, raised in Canada, live in London, and now recently kind of re-domiciled to the UAE. So very international in that sense. I owned a domain name called thecommonwealthkid.com, so I think it says a bit about me. I kind of see myself as a product of that.
Dubai is the perfect place for you then.
Yeah, it's the most international happening city right now in our lifetime, so it's a good place to be.
Perfect. So this basically inspired you to enter the digital world then?
I'd say that, having been 3 times immigrant, you kind of enter a new country and you enter a new economy and society, and you kind of question yourself, like, what purpose am I going to serve here? Am I going to basically fit into these existing structures that are there, the existing business structures, social structures, power structures? Or are you going to challenge them, especially if you believe that they're not exactly designed for equality or parity? And if you want to create something that's more equitable as a society, then it's your duty to find a way to create businesses or organizations that propagate that. And as an immigrant, I borrow an expression from the feminist movement, which says you have to work twice as hard to be considered half as good.
Right.
And with that kind of chip on your shoulder, you kind of say, okay, I'm going to work twice as hard because I want to be considered twice as good.
Right.
And I want to do good, right? So you work with those imperatives to challenge the status quo, create something that's new, create something that people are going to be completely underrating you for, and prove them wrong.
Right. The initiative and the motivation is there. Now, obviously, you just said that starting new companies was basically part of your DNA, and I want to dig deeper into Premfina now. You guys are obviously bringing this transformation into the transactional industry, and you fundraised over 27, million pounds. I just wanted to ask you if you could share with us, what is the story behind this, successful fundraising, and at the end of the day, what does this mean for the future of Premfina?
Yeah. So Premfina is a combination of 2 words, premium and finance. So very simply, if somebody wants or a company wants to buy insurance and not pay for it up front, they'd prefer paying by installments, with a company in between that'll advance the value of the premium to the insurance company and collect monthly installments from the purchaser of insurance with a built-in interest charge. So simple business model. So we're basically advancing credit. In the event that the person or company defaults on payment, it's very simple. We cancel the insurance, we get the tail end of that premium refunded to us. So our risk is not with a person or company buying insurance, it's with a highly rated insurance company. Now, as simple as that is, that business existed in the UK for about 30 years before I came on the scene, right? And it was basically built by large financial institutions, usually banks or private equity-backed firms. And I came as a complete outsider. Like, I barely buy insurance, never mind challenge the insurance industry. So people ask me, like, do you work in insurance? I'm like, no, I barely buy it. And like, what's going to make you successful? I said, that's exactly what's going to make me successful, guys. I have an outsider's perspective. I'm going to question every single piece in the value chain and say, why is it done this way, right? The best book about democracy in America, as the name suggests, was written by Alexis de Tocqueville, a Frenchman. He was the outsider looking at America and questioning the democratic values and processes. So sometimes you have to take that outsider's perspective. But I didn't do that as an armchair analyst. I did that as a person who wanted to challenge the industry and create something new. So we created the first VC-backed challenger. We were like the Revolut to the Barclays. Like, we were the fintech, cool, SaaS platform, digital dashboards, great customer journey company. And we built that company. It was kind of exciting to say, here's a PowerPoint, here's the first logo. We go through our regulatory approval process, and then attract some very serious investors. So in 2017, as you mentioned, we raised this formidable amount of money in our Series A. And that was by Rakuten out of Japan. We had Tim Draper and his VC arm in the UK that participated. They were both on my board. as well as the Thompson family from the Thomson Reuters namesake company, the wealthiest family in Canada, amongst 3 other VCs and investment firms that came through.
They really believed in the project.
They believe in the project, and I think that ultimately the product should sell itself. It's the vision of the founder and their ability, in their confidence rather, in the founder's ability to translate it into reality. But it's ultimately about the product and what gap in the market it fulfills. And it's a big market size. In the UK, this is 10 billion
Wow.
pounds in terms of a market size. The US is like $60 billion, and Australia is another $8 billion. So, and it's growing in other markets like Canada, India, Europe, et cetera. So it's a global market ultimately.
Right.
And then we did a big private equity financial institution round in 2021. We had tens of millions come in the company. Where now we've created from a duopoly in the market, we've created now a 3-way show. So there's a 3-horse show now in the UK for premium finance, and we've got international ambitions.
And I suppose you've created a completely new system compared to the way the banks did it, 20 years before.
Yeah, I mean, they had the advantage of starting early and the disadvantage of being locked into old legacy systems, right? So when we came along, we had a very nifty software as a service platform. In fact, some of the brokers, which were basically our clients, just use our software. And as an entrepreneur, that was not my business model when I started. We were a financing company that used software, but when we saw demand in the market for just renting out our software just as a vanilla product, like any good entrepreneur, we just flipped the model and said, hey, sure, we can provide that too. So today, a big stream of our revenue is actually from purely licensing our software usage, not providing finance.
Right. And how do you see this landscape of, alternative premium finance really evolving in the future, and where does this place Premfina?
So, I'm really fascinated by bridging gaps, right? Bridging different worlds. And that comes from, again, being an entrepreneur, speaking 6 languages. Part of what you do is convert and translate a concept from one language to the other, and this one cultural audience to the other. So similarly, like every good Indian kid, I learned how to code. And, and part of what gives you insights into technology is understanding the language of the technology people, right? So you can talk about tech stacks and what it means to have serverless technologies these days. With premium finance, one of the things that attracted all these investors there was the really high quality of loan assets. So if you think about lending, which is what we ultimately do, I always joke that lending is ultimately a misnomer because lending is the easy part, just giving out money. It's every lending company at the end of the day is a collections company, right? And it's the cost and ease or pain of collecting that really matters. Now here, I don't have to chase someone if they've not paid their loan back. I don't have to go collect their asset. I'm not seizing their car or their property. I simply terminate their insurance and collect the tail end of that insurance from the underwriter.
Good for you, and it's good for them.
It's good for them. Well, also, there's no sort of heavy-handedness. There's no brickbats involved. It's very elegantly simple. And most people don't want to be driving around without insurance. So they'll ultimately pay up rather than you having to terminate their insurance. Now, because of that, and because my counterparty risk is insurance companies, the loss rates we have are in bips. They're like decimal places. And this is the 3rd lending company I've been involved with. This was the first one I founded, but the other 2 I was involved as an investor, as a board advisor, help them get their financing to basically build their loan book. And I realized that, if you had a high loss rate, then it doesn't matter if you charge a high interest because that all gets taken away by the losses.
Right.
So having a low loss rate is incredibly valuable. So, we're running at low loss rates right now. We've created something to complete the circle in this conversation, very high quality real world assets.
Right.
Now, if you look at the decentralized world, digital assets these days are all seeking real world assets they can tokenize. And the tokenization is for high quality assets. In our case, they're high quality, they're high yield bearing, and they're uncorrelated to the market. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin's price goes up or down. We have a consistent stream of yield from high quality assets. So my next kind of challenge is to take this insurance receivable world to the crypto world and create something very exciting for tokenizing these very incredibly safe and high quality real world assets.
And as you said, when we started off this conversation, merge the 2 worlds, modernize it.
Yeah, I was involved very early on in a company that all of us know called Skype, right? And I met Nicholas and Giannis in
Back
London.
in the days.
Back in the days. I'm dating myself here. And Tim Draper introduced me to them when they both moved to London. I met them at the Holiday Inn by Gloucester Road, the world's biggest and probably the most unattractive Holiday Inn. And they discovered that one of the 3 Wi-Fi ports there was not encrypted. So they were using that as the kind of garage-style startup area. And I got fascinated by both the business model and the entrepreneurs behind it, and enamored by the user experience, which always what drives me in a business is what is it doing for the end user and how easy is it making their lives. And that's what attracted me to Skype, right? And I kind of remember from there that when we were looking at talking to investors, they were like, "Are you a software company? Because that's what you provide. Well, where's your enterprise license model?" Well, there is none. It's a different kind of model. You talk to the investors who were interested in telecoms because ultimately you were selling voice on a platform. Yeah. Well, where's your kit? What connects to the PBX or the PSTN, the public switch telephony network? Well, we don't have kit. There's no equipment. This is not a Nokia.
Right.
It's the hybrid model of the two that made it attractive. And again, it's crossing the 2 worlds that made something new as a hybrid that was powerful.
And 2 generations at this point, right?
That too, yeah.
Right.
So, I find that's where I find when you create mergers and meshes between 2 disparate worlds and create something new, that's when you get the possibility of an extraordinary return.
Definitely. And I mean, talking about merging worlds, I suppose collaboration played a vital role in all of your partnerships. I mean, you have investors from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
Japan, Silicon Valley, UK itself. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your strategy to keep all these international partners, happy and nourished, let's say?
Well, I mean, there's different businesses I have, right? So with Premfina, we're growing. It's on its way to, becoming the number 3 player in the UK. So it'll become, with some luck, we'll have, instead of 2 companies dominating the market with 90% market share, we'll go for, the worst case, 3 companies with 90% market share distributed amongst them.
Already have a plan B.
Well, plan B was we are not number 3, we're number 1.
Right.
Right. So
you have to aim high.
You got to go big or go home,
yeah.
right? So, and with my other companies too, I'm building out now Finecchia, which is a company that's focused on the digital asset space. We have some very exciting products coming out, which will again challenge the current, I wouldn't say hype, but the kind of halo effect on ETFs that you've seen in the US.
Yes.
So the Bitcoin spot ETF approval has been a watershed moment in the industry, right? It's legitimized Bitcoin as an investable asset class. Well, if you want to really get a good return, you don't want to come in when it becomes mainstream. You want to come into something before it's mainstream, when it's on the fringe, because your extraordinary returns will come from extraordinary out of the ballpark bets. And when it's mainstream, well, it's no longer out of the ballpark. The returns are incremental, not exponential.
Right.
With ETFs, what's mainstream now is Bitcoin, and the expectation is there'll be Ethereum-based ETFs. We're creating new, not ETFs, because in Europe you have a similar structure called ETNs, or exchange-traded notes, which works similarly, for not just holding the underlying digital assets or cryptocurrencies, but generating yield from them by deploying them in staking pools and, more importantly, in DeFi protocols. So if you can deploy your underlying coins in decentralized finance protocols, which generate an above-market yield much higher than staking, you can give a blended yield that's much better than what you can get anywhere else in the market from these activities. It's a great idea, yeah. And because they're notes, exchange-traded notes, these loan notes can pass on the yield in the form of interest or a coupon, depending how you structure it, back to the loan note holders.
Right.
So that's an advantage. And because they're listed, you can have participation from all levels of investors, whether it's institutional or retail. So we have some very formidable plans to get yield-bearing, DeFi-oriented exchange-traded notes in Europe. We have, I always go for very top-tier partners, as you saw from Premfina, with brands that are there. In this case, we have partnered with FTSE Russell, which is a subsidiary of the London Stock Exchange, for both benchmark pricing, index pricing, as well as co-branding it with them. So they'll be the Finecchia, FTSE, XYZ, whatever.
And they're fully supporting you with the business plan.
With the business plan, with the marketing plan, with the propagation. And we're hoping that comes out pretty soon. And once we announce them, I think you'll find some pretty exciting, again, trend-setting products in the market.
And we hope to have you again then soon to talk about it.
Absolutely. Again, I like building things. So we were also, because we've got, with Finecchia, we've had private investments over the past few years from our balance sheet. So, as part of Premfina, Tim Draper invited all his CEOs to something called the Draper Venture Network in California, where his portfolio company CEOs come there. And I went to that, and there was 2-3 days of, networking, events.
Busy days,
brainstorming about things. And parallel to that conference was another conference Draper held, which was his Limited Partners Conference, where the LPs and his funds were also participating. And I think this was perhaps 2017. At this conference that was running in parallel at the same location, a lot of the LPs went to listen to one person who was the expert in blockchain, crypto, digital assets, if you may. A guy called David Seymour, and he's since set up a company called Wave Digital Assets. I kind of snuck into that conference.
Caught your attention, yeah.
Caught my attention. Like, if all these people who are investors are going to listen to him, well, I want to listen to him,
yeah.
right? So I kind of snuck into that conference, listened to him, and by that evening, we became friends.
Of course.
Right? And then I invested in his firm. Finecki has an investor in his firm. Today, it's one of the top 5 crypto asset managers. So when you want to build something, you have to look at networking with purpose.
Definitely.
Right? And you have to identify people who'll be valuable and get to know them. So there's one example of, building something that's now given us the impetus to build our business in partnership with somebody I met through a different business.
Right. And I mean, constantly growing. I mean, you can always do better. And I feel like every day you have to get up saying, I'm grateful for what I have today, but I can do better tomorrow, right?
I think it's 2 things. One, you got to identify someone's potential in ways that maybe even they don't see it. So I'll give you another example. Once I was meeting again Tim Draper, and I was meeting him, this is many years ago, and I delayed my flight from San Francisco back to London because I had to meet him. So I was like,
for this conversation.
Yeah. So I delayed my flight, and as these things go, sometimes destiny plays a role, right? So I sat next to this person on the plane who moved from his seat, which was in the middle, and he moved up to my seat beside me on the wing side of it, because there was a noisy child. So he's like, can I sit here until we take off? I'm like, fine, sit here. And I said, don't have to worry about just take off, just sit here. So we started talking, and this person was, his name was Paul Danoa. And as we started talking, he said, I was the head of Del Monte International.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I was like, okay, this is fun. We started talking. Well, it turned out Paul was actually Avtar Paul Singh Danoa. So he turned out to be Punjabi and Sikh like me. And it was, not expected because I just thought he was Paul. He grew up in America. I actually grew up in India and America, but he sounded very American. And by the time we landed in London, we became friends.
It was faith.
It was faith. Now, at the same time, as I'd met this person, I was working with the Rothschild family. And at that time, it was with Evelyn Rothschild. And we were looking at transactions in India. Now, Evelyn Rothschild had struck a partnership with Sunil Mittal, who launched a company in India called Airtel, which was one of the earliest returns for private equity. Warburg Pincus had backed them at the time. And he gave a phenomenal return to them as a first-generation entrepreneur with private equity backing in an emerging economy of India. And they were looking for a partner, right? I had a separate business, which was called IndusView, which still exists, which basically advises Western companies on businesses in India. We've taken, for example, Sage in software, Hays in staffing, Experian in credit scoring, Saxo Bank in investment banking and online trading into India. And at this time, this joint venture between the Rothschild family and the Sunil Mittal family was looking for a partner. Guess what?
Oh, boy.
4 months after that flight, they put, I think, $23 million into that joint venture called FeelFresh. Now, if it had not been for that change in flight, not been me talking with that person, not knowing about this opportunity that's there, we wouldn't have had this deal happen. So I pride myself in finding deals that are completely unconventional. I don't look at this deal flow as one geographic location specific. I'm like, the world's a global village.
Yeah.
And so I've got several deals like that I'm proud of, not just because we succeeded in closing them, but they were so unpredictable at the outset, right? I'll give you another example. There's a company it used to be a nanotech company. They made something called linear actuators, which were small versions of motors. Instead of having motors which are clunky or they have basically solenoid coils in them, they're replaced by something that basically has the weight of a paper clip, right? Or a big paper clip, shall we say. Now, they had nanometals in their nanotechnology. They basically gave you 17% movement based on low voltage. So you could create motors, for example, for speedometers, odometers, and cars. You didn't need a heavy motor. You could just replace them with these small ones. Now, they wanted to get the German auto sector involved. Now, here's in East Bay, California, based in Antioch, East Bay in California, trying to get to Europe.
Quite far from Germany.
Quite far from Germany. And Germany is where the innovation takes place in the automobile industry.
Yeah.
Japan fast follows, US mass markets. That's generally the way it works. Trying to penetrate the German auto market, especially their investment side, was not easy. I made that my mission, right? So I probably made, I don't know, between 30 and 50 trips to Wolfsburg, the head of Volkswagen in Germany. I speak some German, so that helped. I spent a lot of time there. I've been there several times, so I kind of understand the cultural mindset. But I also found my friend, who was an American working in Germany, in Volkswagen in Germany. when I first went to them, they said, we don't lead rounds and we don't invest outside Germany.
Very black and white, as Germans usually are.
As usually are.
Yeah.
9 months later,
Guess what?
$2 million leading a round in California.
Crazy.
And followed that, Mercedes came in and Schneider Electric came in. So I realized at the time, this was one of my early deals, that I had something that was different, which is I found investors in deals that other people didn't necessarily spot and didn't necessarily construct or architect.
How do you keep up with all these events that are happening?
I love what I do, right? So I think in the last 20 years, there's probably 2, maybe 3 times when I've got up in the morning saying, oh, I don't feel like doing anything today, or don't feel like working today, because I never treat this as work. For me, it's like painting. It's my hobby. It's what I like doing. It's the challenge of it. It's the thrill of it. It's the idea of challenging the status quo. It's stressful like hell sometimes, right? As an entrepreneur,
Right.
there's stories. People see the glamorous side. They'll see your Instagram posts.
Yeah.
They don't see the blood, sweat, and tears that goes
course.
into it. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And
right?
it's your food for thought.
It's my food for life. I mean,
Yeah. Right. And I mean, as with anything in life, there comes challenges. So I just wanted to enter this discussion now with you. If you could name top 3 challenges that you faced, maybe even top 2 in your life, and just the way you overcame them.
I'd say one of them is not taking on board people's lack of confidence in you. So if you believe in what you are going to go for, you have to have that inner confidence, that inner belief, because there'll always be detractors. There'll be detractors because they'll say you don't come from the industry, based on, in my case, certainly ethnicity has not necessarily been, looked at favorably. Now it's trendy to be Indian background. Silicon Valley has that, but it wasn't always the case. There'll be people who will be, did you get your degree from this place or that place? So always something they're trying to like undercut you with.
Some sort of judgment always existed. you know.
Exactly. And if you let that under your skin and let it bother you, it'll affect you, right?
Of course.
So, a classic example is people were very negative about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, right? My first introduction to that happened in, I think, 2013. And I had worked with an entrepreneur who was German, who lived in California, again, cross-border, and we were at that time trying to buy mp3.com, one of the early music file sharing sites. And this was in La Jolla, and I spent like 2 weeks doing due diligence, made a bid, didn't get accepted because our bid price was a bit too wide in the spread. But I got to know him very well. And he came to London and he organized a dinner. In fact, there were a lot of people who are now pretty prominent in the crypto industry. So for example, Fabric Ventures founders, Richard Muirhead and his brother Charlie were there, who I've again known for a long time.
I mean, kicked off later on.
And they did that later on. So Stefan, who was the person I'm referring to, Stefan Rover, who sadly has since passed away from cancer, he at the time said he invited people to this very elegant, historic French restaurant in East London. And he said, the one thing I want all of you, about 20 of us, he goes, the one thing I'd like you to do tonight, if you're a friend of mine, is to go back home and buy Bitcoin. It's like, I don't care what you buy, just buy it, right? And I worked with him on sort of digital fungible instruments. I knew where he was coming from. And that night, thankfully, not all, but most of us did. We were a bit inebriated, so it was a bit challenging to go and buy Bitcoin at a time, and it wasn't easy to buy it, right? You had to go through like chat rooms and find people who were selling it.
Okay.
But that's when the first exposure happened. And it's because I believed in it, right? Now, most people at the time thought it was like monopoly money.
But it's also because you kind of had the knowledge as well behind it.
I think part of it is understanding the technology behind it, understanding the philosophy behind it, being a bit of a libertarian and challenging some of the government-oriented sort of proclamations and currencies. So that philosophical leaning towards what decentralization and cryptocurrencies offer was certainly helpful, as much as it was the understanding of the technology behind it.
Right. Now, obviously, we are coming to a close end to our interview, but I just wanted to ask you, what advice would you give, to all those young entrepreneurs out there, apart from everything that, we did speak about? Would there be any sort of...
Yeah, look, I'm building a VC firm now because I want to back entrepreneurs, and I call it Glass Ventures because glass is transparent. It can be tough and thick, and so you want to like invest in people. So I'd say ultimately, I look at people who've got passion. I look at people who are very committed, who don't let the lack of confidence get under their skin, who are very solid and they have a solid conviction in what they want to build. They want to do good, right? And I work on a principle which is it's a bit of a variant of this always be selling, and I call it the ACT principle. And I look to see if this person is pitching to me or connecting with me in this way. So what's ACT, right? So it's always be acting instead of always be selling. So ACT is, the first A is access. If you want to connect with people, you've got to find the right access to them. So that's where you go to meetings and conferences and you meet them, right?
And you adapt.
You adapt, but you also want to make sure you're at the conference where people you want to meet are present.
Right.
I've met people like standing in line to go to the toilet. Like I'll just go there because that's where they are.
Yeah.
I'm not shy in that sense.
Yeah.
You have to. So you access them there. The second thing is the C, which is you have to communicate, right? And in that communication, our currency ultimately is our ideas. And in that sort of quiver, if you may, of ideas, you have to have something that is going to be a wow factor. You've got to give them something, some perspective on their life or their business that they have not had before. You got to bring something from your lens and say, aha. So for example, I was with Jerry Yang from Yahoo many years ago, and he was going to launch Yahoo in India. And I said, by the way, do you know there's a Bollywood song from a movie, and the whole song is Yahoo. And he's like, what, really? Guess what? That became their launch jingle song when they launched Yahoo in India.
There you go.
Right? So ever since then, if I ever had to reach out to him, his mobile number was there, his email was there, he was very responsive. Because I got that connection. I'd wowed him with something that he had not thought of or known of before.
Right.
Now, if you do that in this offline communication, that gives you the ability to carry on that thread of conversation online afterwards. So you're continuing that meaningful, purposeful, enlightened conversation that's wowed them, and they remember you. And that's where I take advantage of the fact that I do have a different name, I do have a different background.
Right.
I look Indian, I speak sort of North American, I live in Britain, so go figure. But that's not my advantage. Now they remember me. And the final thing is the T, which is the transaction. Because you can have all the networking you want to do. You can have all
What
the
makes
conversations.
money?
What makes money? How do you monetize all that? Otherwise, there's no return on investment. There's no ROI. Ultimately, it's the deal. So you have to do that ACT part. So I look at entrepreneurs and see, are they weaving their way through this ACT? It's very subconscious.
And can we have some sort of interests align in the future?
Sure. I mean, there has to be an interest in terms of what they're building. Are they doing something that's socially good and powerful? Because that's important to me. Is it financially inclusive? And do have the chutzpah that gets them to this T in the act? Because they have to sell to me and they have to sell to the world. And I look for that in entrepreneurs.
Right. What excites you about doing what you do?
I think the newness of it, right? So again, if you look at what people react to of legacy power structures or post-colonial power structures, in my case, I grew up thinking that capitalism was bad because it was equal to colonialism for me, and challenging those notions, tech offers a big level playing field. Right? It allows for people, whether in Mumbai or Shanghai or Sao Paulo, to be as empowered, because it's not about your background or whether you were born with a silver spoon. It's the power of your ideas, your intellectual horsepower, and your ability to connect and raise capital. Because businesses are built on two things. This is, as Alan Greenspan said many years ago when he was interviewed for the Federal Reserve position. How do you encourage two things? One is risk-taking, and one is capital formation. Those are the two ingredients for business. Well, you can do that from anywhere in the world today. Like, you can access people online, you can reach them on their Telegram channels, you can basically create capital raising events, and you have to find the risk appetite yourself. So to me, I'm excited about the fact that the world is a lot different than it was when I was born, and I'm hoping that'll be a lot different when I leave this world. And I also hope that my net addition to the world while I've been living here is somewhat positive, even if it's 0.0002% positive, or maybe more zeros than that, better than zero, and certainly better than negative.
Well, Bundeep, it was an absolute pleasure speaking to you. This was a very inspiring conversation, and I wish you the best of luck and hope to see you again very soon.
Thanks so much. We'd love to be back here sometime. Thank you, Meena.
Thank you. And that was it from today's interview. Hope you've gathered some insightful information about the fintech world. With you was Meena Vucic. Stay tuned for more content on Entrepreneur Middle East.
To everyone watching, hope this episode provides you valuable insights that will empower you to master the growth of your business. Visit entrepreneur.com for your daily dose of business news and expert advice. You will find this and all future episodes on Entrepreneur TV.